Yes, just very quickly maybe. Brief, okay, sure, that's the mandate. Look, I think that both the two last questions, the two last comments about the pedagogy of reconciliation and the question of the continuity of violence. I think that they're very interesting, and I think that, well, let's just start with pedagogy of reconciliation. It seems to me that what Janssen is doing is precisely recognizing a profound problem that many narratives are unable to recognize, and saying this is something that we need to deal with. And I think it's exciting from that point of view. So, and that you can in some ways relate to that to the questions of protest and questions of violence, which in many ways are repertoires that developed in the apartheid period, repertoires of resistance that are now replicated in a new situation, partly because it's almost as if it's the easiest thing to do. And that comes back to habitus. Now, these are learned patterns, these are known ways of doing things, and when you confront a particular problem that looks similar to a problem that you had 10 years, 15 years, 20 years ago, repeat it. But I wouldn't want to say that it's mere repetition. I mean, you have to look at it afresh in the new conditions. How is it changing? People may do the same thing, but it may have different meanings. And so that's where one's got to look, work more like Michael does with social structure than with the kind of embedded habitus. But I don't think I can really say more than that. Pedagogy, how to approach theorists. Well, I think Michael, in the first place, is just a master at placing one set of theories in relation to another set of theories, and saying, hang on, if this is the case, don't take any of it for granted. And what's so exciting about his work in this book is that he doesn't set up Bourdieu versus Gramsci, for example, in order to prove that Gramsci, the Marxist, is better, but to problematize both and say that both need working on, both need to be engaged with and grappled with. And then I think that the South African part of the work is exactly to take a major theorist and say, there's a clash. The thing, the moment when the theory hits the tar in South Africa is a very violent, difficult and complicated one. And it makes us not only, we shouldn't only be trying to force reality into these theoretical notions, but taking questions back to theory and saying, well, hang on, what does this mean for the heart of the particular theory that one's looking at? So if you want to challenge icons and monoliths, this book should make a modest contribution to that wonderful and exciting challenge.
Thank you. Michael, do you have any brief comments?
Well, the only comment I would have about this teaching, which is just continuing from what Carl said. I don't think Bourdieu was great. He was not very good, as Jeremy said, on the idea of conversation. And I think that's how I would think of, and that's how I think of teaching as a conversation. We talked about the conversation among the theorists, but there are three other conversations. There's a conversation between the teacher and the student. There is the conversation among the students, and then there's the conversation between students and broader publics. And that four-way conversation is what is at the basis of primary teaching. But that is just not in Bourdieu. It's more, you find it more in something like Prairie. And so I think one of the holes in Bourdieu is his failure to be reflective, even though he thinks reflectivity is a great idea, and to really derive about pedagogy. And that's a real problem. And he's doing what Jared wants him to, in a sense, to talk about continuity, reproduction, but doesn't tell us how, doesn't have an alternative vision of pedagogy.
Thanks, Michael. More comments from the floor? Questions?
What about Peter and Rene?
Not yet. They're still mulling over some of your responses, but they'll have something to say before the end of this. Dimitri, sociology.
Hi there. Thanks, Sarah. My name is Dimitri, and I'm relatively new here.
Dimitri,
Yeah.
can you just raise your voice? Sorry, can you just raise your voice a bit? Just come
still
out.
higher. Oh,
Much
okay.
higher.
Oh, okay. This question about continuity and reproduction. And I'm thinking aloud here, but something that really hit my gut was, Carl, when you said, violence gets repeated because it's simply the easiest thing to do. So my question to the panelists is this. The repetition of which violence? The repetition of whose violence? Because if we think historically, and I keep rereading Yvette Christians's novel, Unconfessed, and the violence of colonialism in the context of slavery is the violence of the dominated, the violence of the dominant. And so I think this whole idea of violence being reproduced and being repeated needs to have a deeper question, which for the moment I can only articulate as which violence, when, and whose violence. Because that moment for me that Christianse captures is an absolutely crucial moment for me to understand, for example, why rape might be such a common practice in our society. But how do we get from the moment of Sila van den Kaap in Unconfessed to now? And how do we iteratively have conversations across those historical periods? That is what I'd really like to hear your thoughts on. Thank you.
An interesting question. Dimitri, you'll enjoy chapter 4 that speaks of some of those issues, and as a response from Fanon, the Richard of Valen. So yeah.
Claire Bedingberg.
Claire from the University
From the School of Architecture and Planning. I haven't read the book yet, so forgive if my question is has got obvious responses. But how are you dealing, or are you addressing the concept of the Bourdieusian concept of capital in the book? And related to the discussion on how to understand change and how to get out of the constraint of habitus, doesn't this notion give a little bit of agency even under constraint that could help conceptualize a notion of change, resistance, or different strategies?
A comment, question? Issue about violence. Oh, and someone else? No, back to Tessa.
Sorry, it's Tessa again. Dimitri's comment kind of gave me clarity of this question. It's the question of habitus. And have you figured out how to address the question of the history of habitus? Like, because Bourdieu starts at the point where we know that there is a field and you have habitus, but it doesn't always give a clear path to the history of habitus and how it comes about.
Okay. Jeremy? Yes.
Just one comment, which is picking up on this theory. I wish I knew how to teach theory. It's an immensely difficult thing to teach, and I think I do it badly. The conversations that are in this book, I think, are a very useful teaching device. I teach a course in which Bourdieu appears. I wish I could say that I have a set of lectures like Michael's, which are conversations between Bourdieu and another group of theorists. So I teach him in the context of different theoretical traditions. I don't have that set of conversations written, but maybe in 5 years' time they'll be done. And I think that a different set of conversations exposes a different dimension to Bourdieu. So conversations I'd like to see myself, or preferably even someone else, write up conversations through Bourdieu and Weber. very obviously, no one's mentioned Weber. Bourdieu isn't anything, he's a Weberian, much more than he's a Marxist. And the marks he gets, I think he primarily gets from Weber. And I think that, to represent him as simply saying that the poor or the subordinate, are incapable of understanding, of having good sense about their situation, is a little bit of a one-sided representation of Bourdieu. Because I think my reading of Bourdieu is that at certain points, what he's saying, and I think he's ambivalent, he's contradictory, and a lot of what he says I'm quite convinced by Michael's nonsense. But at certain points, what he's saying is a Weberian argument that the privileged classes of society monopolise non-material goods, they monopolise cultural goods, they monopolise what we might call cultural capital. And that cultural capital entails forms of understanding about how the system works. And if poor people don't have them, it's because the rich are monopolising them. And the rich obviously also monopolise all of those lifestyle and cultural aesthetics that goes with classification, which is a way in which rich people know who's rich.